hope that everyone can hear me okay, especially people who are a little further away in the car. My name is Akiva Feinstein. It's a big zchus, a big merit to be here. I'm here because Rabbi Ben Susan, the rabbi of Rinat Israel, who was close to the family, really wanted to be here. But unfortunately, due to health reasons and due to reasons of the storm, he wasn't able to be here to officiate at the service. But again, it's truly an honor for me to learn about this special family, learn about the special legacy, and also firsthand to be able to meet some of you who were so good to her and really cared about her so greatly. It's pretty clear who she was. It's easy to summarize her life as a Yiddish mama, as a real Jewish mother who took care of everybody and everything, felt a great responsibility for this world, felt very responsible to make sure that everything was done right, and that her kinderlach, their enichlach, her friends, her family were all good, happy, and healthy. She definitely spent her life watching over people in all different kinds of circumstances. And at the same time, all of us also, we hope to be watching over her children, and I know this is a very difficult loss, for her son of blessed memory, for Fred, for her grandchildren and her great-grandchildren, certainly for Louise, her sister, also for Harry, who's in the car here, definitely. Sorry? And her daughter-in-law, Pauline as well, most certainly. And just to make sure we mention by name, also, Alana and Brooke, and Alana's children, Haley and Daphne as well. Certainly a very difficult loss for the family, and I see some other survivor families here as well. And again, I'm sure for them and many extended families of Cleveland, for Jewish Family Services, for all the other survivors, we certainly will definitely miss her very, very much. I wanted to start with the recitation of the Psalms, and we will sing together now the 23rd Psalm. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai roi lo eksar, B'nai stesha yarbitzeni, al mei menuchos yanachaleni, Nafshi yeshovev yancheni v'maglei tzedek leman shemo, Gam ki elach b'geit samaves, lo yirara ki ata imadi, Shiftacha umishantacha hema yanachamoni, Tairach lefanai shulchan neged sarai, Yishanta v'shem en roshi kosi ravaya, Ach tov v'chesed yirdefuni, kol yimei chayai, V'shavte v'beis Adonai le'orach yamim. A Psalm of David. God is my shepherd, I shall not lack. In lush meadows he lays me down, beside tranquil waters he leads me. He restores my soul. He leads me on paths of justice for his name's sake. If I walk in the valley overshadowed by death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in view of my torments. You anointed my head with oil, my cup overflows. May only goodness and kindness pursue me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord for many long days. It's also our custom to read what is known as the Eishes Chayil, the woman of valor. Certainly because she was a woman of valor, but also because it's a common custom at the Shabbos table on a Friday night, after the wife, the mother, has worked so hard on preparing the beautiful Shabbos, we sit down at the table and we give her first a special tribute for all that she does for her family. So this we say to her, Eishes Chayil miyimsa, mirachot mipnini michra, batach balev bala, v'shel lo yiksar, gemal su tov v'lo ra, kol yemei chayecha, darsha et semru ufishtim, b'tas v'chapetz chapecha, haisa kaniyav socher, mimerchak tavi lachma, v'takem v'yoid laila, b'titin teraf, levesa v'chok narasecha, zamama sadeh v'tikachechu, mipri b'kapecha natu karim, Chagra ba'oz masecha, ve'taimed zarsecha. Tama ki toiv sachra, lo ki yalichbe v'layla neira. Yedecha shilcha v'kishor, ve'kapecha samchu faleh. Kappa parsa li'ani, ve'yadecha shelcha li'evdon. Lo simre v'bisa nishalek, ki kol besa levushanim. Marvadi masasala, sheish v'argman l'uvusha. Noda b'sharim bala, v'shifta im zikne aretz. Sadin asasa v'timkor, v'chagar nasin kanani. Oz v'hadar levusha, v'tizchak liyam acharon. Picha pascha v'hachma, v'saras chasid al l'shoina. Savia halicha l'spesa, v'lechem atzlus lo sochel. Kamu v'necha v'yeshura, v'ala v'yahala, rabus v'nasasochayu, v'yatalis al kolana. Sheker achein v'hevel hayofi, isha yiras Adonai, hi tishalel. Tenu la mipri yadecha, v'halucha v'sharim ma'asecha. We say in English, an accomplished woman who can find far beyond pearls is her value. Her husband's heart relies on her, and he shall lack no fortune. She repays his good, but never his harm, all the days of her life. She seeks out wool and linen, and her hands work willingly. She is like a merchant ship, from afar she brings sustenance. She rises while it is nighttime, and gives food to her household, and a ration to her maidens. She envisions a field and buys it. From the fruit of her handiwork, she plants a vineyard. With strength she girds her loins, and invigorates her arms. She discerns her enterprise is good. Her hand she stretches out to the staff, her palms support the spindle. She spreads out her palm to the poor, and extends her hands to the destitute. She fears not snow, for her household is clothed with scarlet wool. She makes a cloak to sell, and delivers a belt to the peddler. Strength and majesty are her raiment. She joyfully awaits the last day. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and a lesson of kindness is on her tongue. She anticipates the ways of her household, and partakes not of the bread of laziness. Her children arise and praise her. Her husband, he lauds her. Many daughters have amassed achievement, but you have surpassed them all. False is grace, and vain is beauty. A God-fearing woman, she should be praised. Give her the fruits of her hands, and let her be praised in the gates by her very own deeds. There's no doubt that her life story is so extensive that it would take hours upon hours to tell it. Certainly there were details that she wanted us to know that she shared, and certainly many details she could not share that were simply too difficult to do so. Certainly she spent a lot of time telling her family stories, and I'm sure a lot of you already know many of these stories by heart that I will tell you. And the reason we tell them, even though perhaps most of us or almost all of us know these stories, is really for her sake. In the Jewish tradition, there's an idea that at a person's funeral, that they're present, their soul is present with us. They're hearing the words that we're saying. And we want her to hear that we knew her struggle, we knew her story and all the things she went through. We knew how hard she tried to live a life to be there for us. And I also credit her son, who I don't have to give credit to because I think everyone knows the extent of his caring and his love and his devotion. And certainly, who else knows his mother more than he did? So thanks to the stories and the information that he shared with me in a phone call that we made this morning. So I think all of us know that she was born in Bobov, Poland. And I think whenever I know her from a short interaction that we had in Montefiore many months ago, and I figured that anytime she spotted a rabbi, she would want to put out the Bobov thing, because that would be an instant credit, an instant card, a connection to something very famous. You know, lahavdil, as they say, you know, it's like saying I'm from Hollywood, you know, and then you want people to ask, you know, who do you know from there? So she said that to me, and she was so proud of Bobov, and she knew that would get me in the room, and a whole long conversation would ensue. And certainly that was part of her life. So she grew up in this famous town in Poland. In the early years, which were much easier, and certainly the later years right before the war, were very difficult. Her parents' Hebrew names were Yitzchak and Rivka Malka Greenwald. She was the firstborn, and then 12 years later, her brother Harry came along, and then 14 years later, her sister Louise. Given the gap in ages, it was clear that she was the helper in the family, and then some. She was a little mother to the two of her siblings. And not only was it her personality, but situationally she had to be. Her mother was too weak and too sick at that point in her life to be a mother and to raise these two children, which she did so faithfully to her sister and brother, her siblings. The kids were all in the different classes of the famous Halberstams, the Bobover Rebbe's, and by association, the family had a connection to this famous Hasidic group. I can't remember exactly, but I think someone got so excited by her connection to Bobov, they promised her a picture, one of the rabbis who worked at Montefiore. She came from a very observant Jewish family, you know, who davened in the local shtibel. They were not Hasidim, but they were very much part of the Jewish life, you know, at the town in those days. But then the war came, and things certainly turned terrible. But it seems to me from many of the stories that I've heard from Holocaust survivors, there was a uniqueness in the story of this family, because the entire family fled on their own feet. They all fled together. And they were somehow, with God's help, successful. They were able to go from Poland to Siberia, then all go all the way to Tajikistan. And then, what's more amazing, surviving all those years through work camps and coal mines and hard labor, but they managed to stay together as a family unit, which was truly a miracle. And that was not only miraculous, but somehow they had this will to return to Poland. They wanted to see what their home was like, what they left behind, what would still be there with them. But they all came back to the town, and as we can expect, very sadly, they returned to the villagers. And the villagers looked at them with great surprise. What are you Jews doing back here? What did you come for? What did you think would still be here for you? But that didn't stop them from their continuous trek for freedom and to find a place to raise a family. And their goal was on the United States of America, coming to a free land to raise the children, the grandchildren, and so forth. And through a connection, which I believe was through her sisters, her mother's sisters, and brothers who were in America, they were able to get sponsorship to be able to come to America. And as the family was heading west towards America, they had to stay in Germany. And that's where, in 1946, Mania met her Beshert, her Ezer Kenegdo, her soulmates, Morris Horn, in Poland, excuse me. And so on the way out of Poland, on the way to the United States in 1948, their firstborn son, Marvin, of blessed memory, was born, and they came to the United States in 1949. They were definitely a family of hard workers, of getting to the job. We probably know all the stories about how Morris was in the boat, the transport ship, and he was already working as a baker. They had already heard about the talent of his hands and his abilities, and put him to work before he had even reached the shores of the United States of America. We all know how hard he worked at Unger's and many of the local bakeries in the Cleveland area. But while he worked hard outside of the home, Mania worked very hard inside of the home. She was a truly devoted housewife. And the most important thing on her mind from the second she woke up in the morning was, how would I feed my children good food, especially food of the Heim, heimische food, food that she was used to, and food that tasted good, that would make you warm and healthy. Every Thursday morning, she woke up with a plan. What's going to be for Shabbos? The chicken soup and the rice and the farfel, the filter fish, the lukshin. All of those important menu items were part of her plan to make sure that she got it so tasty and delicious. It could not have been very easy for her to come to America and have to learn English and learn all the new cultural norms. But that's what she did, because she wanted to be an American. She wanted to pass her citizenship test. She wanted to be able to successfully be part of American life, to raise her children and give everything she possibly could give to them. At first they settled in the city of Cleveland, in the Kinsman area. Then they moved on to Cleveland Heights, and then ultimately to University Heights. Their being in University Heights made it possible for Morris to daven in the shul, the Rinat Israel shul, which is a connection to Rebbe Ben Susan. And he really loved to go to shul. He loved the fact that the Yabi, the Rinat Israel, was right down the street and very close to them. And Mania was a big supporter. She went to shul whenever she could, but she was a big supporter of her husband, that he was a devoted shul goer. For her, again, the focus was family. And so when subsequent generations of Horns came along, she very, very pleasantly greeted them. So her grandchildren, and then her great-grandchildren. And one of her greatest pleasures was being able to make a Shabbos meal and invite not only her children, but her grandchildren. And she would spend particular time in making sure not only did she serve all the good Jewish food, but she served it the way that they liked them. And so I imagine her grandchildren had a mixture of Yiddish tastes and also American tastes. And she had no problem making sure that she satisfied all of their tastes. No matter how picky they were, she found a way to make it just right, the way that they enjoyed. And she certainly carried on this tradition to the next generation, to Haley and Bethany. After the time of helping with the grandkids, and then the great-grandkids came, she had a little bit more time, and her and Morris were able to take it easy a little bit. And they generally were pretty simple people, homebodies. And the greatest joy that they had was just being together, spending some time in the house with one another. They sometimes traveled when they could. They could go to Israel occasionally. They went to Israel, they went to Florida. But again, regular life was that which they appreciated the most. And she continued every single day, as she got older, to make sure that her dedication as a housewife, the house was just perfect and the right place for her husband to be, and her grandchildren and great-grandchildren to be as well. Certainly it was very hard when Morris passed away some 23 years ago. It was definitely difficult for her, because they were very close. But she kept herself busy. She kept her connection with many other Holocaust survivors. She enjoyed being part of Kol Israel, the Holocaust survivors organization. The last few years were definitely difficult. She definitely suffered her own health setbacks, and things became more complicated. But she kept up with the same theme, that if I can do it for myself, I'm going to do it. And she really never let go of that control, that she wanted to be able to be as independent as possible. And certainly that was a tribute to her and her greatness, but also says a lot about her family. So I know that Fred and Pauline, you guys were right there for her. As very, very devoted caregivers. And it sounds to me, from what I'm hearing, is that when you were needed and you were helped, you jumped right in to be able to be there for her. But when she needed her independence, she needed to do things her own way, even if they weren't the greatest way, you let her be that way also, because you knew how important that was to her own joy and self-esteem, and and independence was so important to her. And it's definitely, it's for good reason that in our Jewish tradition we put so much, focus on the fifth commandment, on the honoring of our parents. It's one of the few mitzvahs that are mentioned with particular reward, because it's one of the most difficult difficult mitzvahs. To be able to know that you did enough, you did it in the right way, that you didn't somehow insult a person's sense of themselves in the process. And I see how hard you guys tried to do that so carefully. But I think it's very easy for us to summarize her life, in a sense that it was all about kindness. It was always about the other person, taking care of them. A funny story that Fred told me was that she was just like your typical Jewish mother in her focus on temperatures. That you always had to be warm. You always had to have a coat, and she'd always ask you, "Where's your coat? Aren't you going to put on a coat?" And Fred told me that one day, it was in July, it was nice and hot outside in the 80s or the 90s, but the air conditioning was on inside. And she has a sense that it was cold. And something inside of her soul said, if it's cold, I got to ask my son and make sure he's okay. So in the middle of a July afternoon, she said to Fred, "Where's your coat? Don't forget to put it on." Because that's just how she thought. She definitely had the Jewish mother traits about being worried. She worried way more about ourselves than we worried about ourselves. And you can imagine how many different people she worried about on a daily basis. And certainly that says a lot about her. As I said many times, her love was expressed in many ways, but in particular her love was expressed in the food. And making the Shabbos dinners that she had everyone around her, and she could see them and they could see her and enjoy the food together, was one of the most incredible moments of joy for her as well. But I think also as a Holocaust survivor, it sounds like she has a special perspective. She had a special perspective. That despite all the bad that she saw and all the suffering and all the losses, she had a perspective with a lot of faith. She had a lot of faith in God that He took her and her family out of this horrible situation and brought her to a good one. That she really believed in God and really believed in the way that things worked. And she recognized the fact that her own life was a miraculous life. That being able to leave what she had and come to America, then to raise such good children, raise such good grandchildren and great-grandchildren, all of that was not by accident, but it was by a miracle. And I don't know how much she realized it had to do with her. That her courage and her love and her commitment was definitely the reason why her family and her descendants turned out so good. But I wouldn't be able to tell her whole story if I didn't say how strong-willed she was. She was definitely a strong-willed person. Definitely a very, very assertive person. She knew what she wanted, but again, for her, it was clear that that was sent from God. God sent her a very difficult life with a lot of things to do, and the tool that she needed to do it was strong will, and thank goodness she got that in plenty. So as I close my words, I hope I covered the most important things, because I didn't know her so well, but again, it was such a privilege to speak to her family, who did really know her, and do really cherish her story. And I know not all the details are known about her life story, but it seems like she took the time to teach you guys the way in life, what's most important, and to build the character in her family. And that's what she was very successful in doing. So, we bless all of you guys and give you all of you guys my condolences. That God should watch over you, and that now, our Yiddish Mama is in Shemayim, she's in heaven, and she should continue to watch over all of us. Give blessings to her children and her descendants and her friends and her family, and she'll always be watching out for us. And I can certainly picture she's the type of person who's in heaven, and if she doesn't like what God is doing, she will ask for a meeting with Him and say to Him, "Hey, what's up? This doesn't seem fair. Can't you do a little bit better?" So certainly she'll keep going and watching over us, and we certainly thank her for all she did, and we acknowledge her greatness. And there's no one who can replace someone like her, a very, very special neshama, a very special person, and who could calculate all the kindness and all the giving that she did over her life. And so her memory should be for a blessing. And the idea that she lived such a long life, more than 100 years, really tells you that her children and her family really knew what they were doing, and they kept her very happy and they kept her very safe. And with the pain that they might have in their heart, over this loss, they should just know the blessing of all those years, that they worked so hard for. That the blessing really came true. So now we're going to move to the next phase, which is acknowledging her and honoring her, not just with our words and the stories, but with the physical aspect. And the idea of the earth, which surrounds her, and brings her soul comfort, is something that we should do as her family and as her friends. Our own toil, our own labor is the most important way of expressing this particular chesed. So now I'm going to call upon her son, if he doesn't mind taking the shovel, replacing a little bit of earth, and then we'll ask the immediate family to follow, and then everyone else who's present to assist us as well.
It's difficult all the time.
Here too, it's easier.
Where's he?
Sorry? It's very hard, yeah. It's so heavy.
They will finish. When we step away, they will finish everything for us.
They'll be able to do it.
They'll bring the machine.
Okay, folks, if folks would like to come back in closer towards the tent as we complete the final parts of the service here.
got her again. We got rid of her for 23 years, but you're back with her.
Just as we close, just a few brief announcements. That folks are not expected to contribute, but if they wish, they could do so to the Kol Israel Foundation, to the Bika Cholim of Cleveland, or to the United States Holocaust Museum. We're going to now say the memorial prayer, and followed by the memorial prayer, we will have the family say the Kaddish, and then after the completion of the service with the Kaddish, we're going to make a special row of consolation, and that means that everyone who's here who's not the sister or brother, not the son, those people will make 2 rows, and those two rows will face each other head to head, and between those 2 rows will walk the people who are the mourners as they return after the service back to their vehicles. So now we're going to say the memorial prayer, the theme of which is that God watches over all of those who have passed away, and He puts them under His special care. El Mali Rachamim, Shoichein Bamrumim, Hamsei Menucha Nechayna, Al Kanfei Hashchina, B'Malois Kedoshim Utaharim, Kezarakia Mazhirim, Es Nishmas Mania Baskitzchak, Shalacha Leilama, Bavor Shanachnu Mispalim B'Hazkaras Nishmasa, Began Eden Tehei Menuchasa, L'chein Bal Harachamim, Yastirecha Besisa Kanafav Le'olamim, V'yitzur B'tzor Chaim Es Nishmasa, Adinai Hu Nachalasa, V'sanuach Al Mishkava B'Shalom, V'Nomar Amen. O God, full of mercy, who dwells on high, grant proper rest on the wings of the divine presence, in the lofty levels of the holy and the pure ones, who shine like the glow of the firmament. For the soul of our most beloved Mania, daughter of Yitzchak, who has gone into her world, and for whom we pray. May her resting place be in the Garden of Eden, and may the Master of Mercy shelter her in the shelter of His wings for all eternity. And may He bind her soul in the bonds of life. God is her heritage, and may she repose in peace on her resting place. And now we say together, Amen. Amen. Now we're going to recite the Kaddish together. One second. So maybe we'll just make sure that we'll just make sure that Harry hears us. I don't know if Harry can hear us for the Kaddish. If someone else,
You should face her.
yeah, we're gonna face that way. But if someone just wants to run and just tell Harry to say Kaddish, yeah, just to give him a moment, because I know he wanted to. Yes, we're gonna face the Mizrach, which is this side here.
Gavin, you want to put the microphone over there?
Microphone's not working. You fell in the water.
That was.
Yep. Okay.
She was in control. She even took care of this.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Gavin.
So, make sure that Harry hears. Okay, so let's see the Kaddish together nice and slow.
Yiskadav, Yiskadash, Shemei Rabbah, V'yalma, Divrah, V'yosei, V'yamli, V'yosei, V'chayei Chon, V'yomei Chon, V'chayei Echol Beis Yisrael, V'yagalav, V'yizman Kari, V'yiru Amei.
Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabbah V'yarach V'yolam V'lei Yomayo.
Yisbarach, Yishtafah, Yisbarach, Yisramam, Yisnasei, Yissadar, Yissaleh, Yissalel, Shemei D'Pikshah, V'yudu, Le'ela, Min, Kol, Berkowitz-Kumin-Bookatz, V'shvachasa, V'nechamasa, V'amiram, V'yoma, V'yiru Amei. Yehi Shmei Rabbah Ben Shemaya, V'chayim Aleinu, V'chol Yisrael, V'yimru Amei. Yiseh Shalom, V'ramah, Uya, Yiseh Shalom, Aleinu, V'chol Yisrael,
Amen.
Condolences to the whole family. Now we're just going to go ahead and move these chairs, and then everyone's going to make the 2 lines of consolation. Family, everyone is, people are invited to attend the Shabbat gathering at the family home.